You just take a meter into your hand, and then you're plugging in the phone, which is being charged, and you're holding it in the hand. And you will see that basically your body gets positively charged, and positively charged not meaning in a positive health kind of way, but more from an energy point of view. Protons basically going into our body, they are something which is causing inflammation and heat and stress in our body.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soberhead in English, Ayık Kafa podcast. I have as my guest today Hagen Thiers, and he's well known in this field of EMF radiation, how to protect one from these radiations. Also among the people who has real concerns of the thermal and non-thermal effect of EMF. People who has been watching this podcast, Hagen, I've been constantly talking about my concern about EMF radiation, and also people are going to see and always see that this key shield device is always with me. I have one big one at home, but this one, whether I do a podcast or I'm in my car or I travel, I take it with me. And I'm extremely concerned, to be honest with you, after I listened to so many biohackers podcasts. Even before meeting you, I started being concerned about this bombardment of variety of EMF radiation. And more I dig into it, more I see that I really do not have much knowledge. And honestly, before starting to our podcast, I had to really somewhat educate myself to really understand, because they are a bit technical for me because I'm not in that field. But the thing is that I was doing my researches. I'm an excited buyer. I just get convinced by everybody's messages. So I reached out to so many companies, and we will discuss about that. And then finally, I was able to see in one website your product, Waveguard, and these key technologies. And I started, obviously, I'm a doctor in psychology, and I know how to read studies. And when I see that, oh, yeah, there are real evidence that how much these devices are helping, which I would like you to explain, I started using it. But, it's so difficult to protect ourselves because I'm an addiction specialist. But when it comes to the devices that we're using, I'm not able to control myself. It's just like the proposed values are so high. And because we're not able to touch, feel the negative effects of these radiations, it's really difficult to understand that it is really harming us. And with that said, welcome again. Hagen, maybe we start with what happened to you. Everybody loves to hear the truth and the real story. And you have a very, very important story and a message to give to people why you got into this whole EMF world.
Well, I have been sensitive as a child to radiation. So I have been raised in the beginning of the 90s. And so everything which I grew up with was still an environment which was very low in EMFs. But then I specifically, in my childhood, I was exposed to all of the new generations which came to the broad daylight and made our lives more convenient, I guess. But I had very strong health issues and reactions to this technology which came into our lives. And so my father, he was trying to help me with that, and we found out, okay, I have the electrosensitivity problems. And then we were kind of going on a mission to look, okay, how can we help myself with these problems? And that was, well, becoming a very big mission in that terms, because we noticed I'm first of all not alone with that. You find out when you're looking into the studies that everybody is having reactions, negative reactions in their body's health when it comes to radiation, and some are just more sensitive and have stronger reactions than others. But for all of us, it has some effects. And so for me, this journey became a lifelong mission, I would say. And I was also then spending 3 years in the nature of Scandinavia and lived there very remotely without any cell phone reception, any electricity, and so on, and was living living a very off-grid kind of life for a pretty long period of time. And every time when I came back to society, you could say so, where there was cell phone signals again and Wi-Fi and radiation and other smartphones and so on, I would get the biggest health reactions and biggest health problems coming from that. And so the issue has been very real for me. It has been quite a challenge to find a lifestyle to deal with this kind of symptoms. And so I made it my mission to trying to help other people there in this way and bring out some solutions to the world which help us that we can use technology but don't have any more those health effects which normal people all are facing nowadays from being exposed to radiation at a constant time.
Perfect start. So let's explain, what is EMF? What is EMF radiation? What are the types? Because while you were talking, I'm a bit older than you, the only thing we learned was the microwave. Don't look into the microwave. I mean, still today, we have all these gadgets around us, on us, and the only warning that we really had, don't look into the microwave for some reason. So the stage is yours. Explain us.
Well, there is a lot of different types of radiation and electromagnetic fields, which is what EMF stands for. So we have there the Earth magnetic field, which is already kind of the basement, and everything which is usually exposed from the Earth to us is below 100 hertz. Also, our body is having an own electromagnetic field and is also communicating in this. Our cells function by this. Our brain communication and synapses work in the same way. So we are also ourselves using an electromagnetic field. And this seems to be actually already some sort of the problem, because we're having basically a stronger radiation field around us, which is basically using the same kind of communication signaling and pathways as our body is using, but just in a much louder way, to say it in a more common way. And so therefore there seems to be some sort of disturbance happening in our own body communication. And the most common sources of radiation and electromagnetic fields which we are exposed to, first of all, the biggest exposure comes from our own cell phone. Mm-hmm. Then we have our Wi-Fis, we have our smart gadgets or some Bluetooth accessories like smart trackers, like smartwatches, Bluetooth headsets. But it also goes all the way to radio frequencies and to, for instance, also now we have a very strong problem with the 5G networks, which are being exposed in the most remote areas of the world by the satellites, for example. So that nowadays we are having a very big amount of EMFs which we are exposed to from different sources and in different danger categories.
Now that you mentioned all these trackers and etc., it really confuses me, because while there's this science and these trackers also are promoted by very well respected professors and etc., like this bed cover that I have, 8 sleep pod, I put a timer on my Wi-Fi router. And I realized that when that shut off, the bed shut off, or the bed cover shut off. I'm like, okay, now how am I going to do this? And then the Oura Ring, and then, so many other things in the house that I didn't just go and buy from the black market. It's just like professors from Stanford, professors from whatnot, they're all liking these. I don't want to say promoting the negative effect, but liking it. So what happens, and how are people so reluctant of not understanding the harm?
Well, I think it takes some kind of devotion to look into the studies to say, okay, I really want to find out if there is something dangerous about it or not. And there's many things which we have seen in our society which have been absolutely normal for a very long period of time. Like, for instance, we have been using asbestos very commonly in our building constructions in the last century. And so then it took us over 34 years to find out that it's extremely harmful and that we should not be including this kind of materials in our life. And the same is counting for so many things, like, for instance, the tobacco industry, which was for, I think, over 30 years promoting that smoking is actually health benefiting to ourselves. And it took already 30 years to come to that point that they don't anymore make positive health claims. And then it took even longer until the true science came through and was so pushing and demanding that the public recognized, okay, there's actually health damages coming from smoking. And so it takes time, and especially in such an invisible field, which is not very obvious, like smoking a cigarette. I can understand that in such subjects, it could even take a little bit longer. But even just from a historical point of view, we are pretty much in time. The research from the skeptical interest groups, they find that there is a number of very concerning studies, and they are bulking up, but still nobody is saying like, okay, this is now our most serious issue. And the pressure becomes more and more. And when we're looking how long it took for other industries which were going through the same circle to come to that point that they say it's very health harming, then we're actually in a very normal cycle that it takes this long time.
I guess Europe is much more robust on these restrictions, such as iPhone 12, I guess, which I had one. Since I moved from America, I didn't feel the need of changing it because it was the time to time I was using it. And then I realized that phone was banned because it seems like there's more radiation compared to the other phones for some reason. But I listened to you in one podcast, I guess. What are the potential dangers? Because one thing, like we talked about the thermal effect, and I would like you to explain, people understand that much better.
The thermal effects are what is considered the normal problem, basically, from radiation, from the government, from the World Health Organization, and their consultancy agencies, which are doing some research evaluation for the World Health Organization. And so basically what that means is that when we are using a phone, then there is a heat production coming from that phone, which is heating up our skin tissues and our body. This has been quantified, and it's called the SAR value, the specific absorption rate. And so what this is doing and looking at is how much heat production is happening over a period of 30 minutes when making a phone call, for instance, then at your tissues of your head. Mm-hmm. And this has been something which has been considered dangerous, which is where we are looking into, okay, is this something which is in the guidelines? And so for this issue of the thermal effects, we are having guidelines, which is actually a very big subject for itself. We could go for this subject alone already on a pure podcast, because those safety guidelines, they're kind of false. And what you were just mentioning with the ban in Europe of the iPhone, that had something to do with the SAR value, but it wasn't the only phone which has been banned. It was just the most prominent name on the list. But in real life, it is like that 9 from 10 phones are exceeding the safety guidelines in real life scenarios versus then what they are specified for from the government, where they should work in real life. So they are testing them in the lab. In the lab, they find out they are safe according to the guidelines. But when it comes to real life exposure, they're exceeding the safety guidelines by far. 9 from 10 devices on the market. And this is something which is already also from the heating perspective, something concerning.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that we can feel the heat. Since I started understanding this concept, whenever I have the phone in my hand, even I drop on something, I said like, okay, now if it's going to be creating a cell death, it's going to be creating the same cell death in my palm. So, but the most concerning is the non-thermal effect. Correct? Because it's coming from everywhere. It's not just like the phone that you're holding.
Well, that is, I think, very comparable to smoking a cigarette. When we are comparing phones to smoking a cigarette, there is a number of correlations there. This is like looking at how dangerous is smoking and then only look for how long is the temperature in our lung changing when we have smoked. And that would be for a very short period of time. And then it should only not be too hot, as lower as possible, right? But what's it doing to the body? What kind of side effects are happening there? How much less oxygen are we consuming? And what kind of poisonuses are happening to our body? And the same thing is with radiation. So there is the thermal effects, which is already something concerning, but a much bigger effect is the long-term health effect from the non-thermal part, which is basically the side effects of being exposed. And there is a number of explanations on why there is so many effects. So we found out that there is a very big effect on our health by being exposed in terms of stress, in terms of cortisol, adrenaline production, in terms of cell death, in terms of hormonal disbalance, in terms of just receiving chronic injuries and diseases. So there's a number of problems which are happening just because we are exposed to it. And this seems to be very much also the case because our body is using the same kind of signaling system like our modern communication systems. Our body is also communicating in the same frequencies, in the same kind of energy ways like our cell phone and cell phone towers are communicating with each other. And that seems to be that there is just a lot of disturbance happening to our body's own way of functioning as an independent, undisturbed being. And we have to remember that this kind of technology hasn't been there for our ancestors. Mm-hmm. And when we are comparing the amount of radiation which we are exposed to nowadays than versus 100 years ago, we're speaking about 10 billion times a higher exposure amount of radiation than what it has been there 100 years ago. And so this makes it very clear that this sort of exposure hasn't been there for a very long term. We have not very many long-term studies. And the more time is passing, the more long-term studies are revealing that this is something which we should be very concerned about and take very seriously.
I read in one of your presentations something that you were putting on the board, like some issues that you counted, like headache, digestive issues, cell damage, increased risk of cancer, sleep disorders, skin irritation, concentration disorder, infertility, and cardiovascular issues. There's a lot.
Yes. There has almost not been found an area of the body where it does not have a negative effect, to be very clear about it.
So is it like almost like you explained our body function with similar...
It's a similar principle. Yes, it's a similar principle which our body is functioning as the technology is. And that seems to be part of the problem why it has so many effects on so many areas, since it's basically disturbing the fundamental parts and working as our body.
That's what I was thinking. Like, so almost like it's jamming. It's like stopping the actual natural healing process, functioning process, and it's like an external, like 100 billion times of an energy coming in, and it doesn't allow the cells to communicate properly. And with that said, can you please tell us about the research studies that you conducted with the universities about, so it's a much clearer view that I can understand when you say about the cut on the hand and how it's healing and not healing. So it makes much more sense to me and to people.
If we're looking into the most interesting studies which came out, basically, then we're seeing, for instance, the studies from Dr. Martin Pall, which have been looking at the effects that it's basically having, especially on our brain and on our weakest parts in our cells, that it's having a very strong effect, which is causing cell death in the end and oxidative stress in almost all cells, but specifically in brain cells and in the cells which are in our brain. And this is something which has been very, very concerning. We can see that everybody is literally producing cortisol and reacts in a stressful manner to radiation. And this is something why we see, for instance, more chronic inflammation, or why we are seeing more sleeping disorder. And for some people, they feel it, and they're like me, that when they're not protected and are in a 5G environment, that their sleep is dropping, that they cannot fall asleep anymore for for more than 1 or 2 hours a day because the stress level is too high, because I'm still so sensitive today about this topic and about these issues. And other people, they will just have a lower sleep index. And so this is something which we have to remember. Then there has been a study from the Cleveland Clinic in the United States, a very prestigious institution with over 60,000 employees. And they have a department there, which is the Institute for Reproductive Medicine in the United States. And they were doing a study already, I believe it was in 2008, where they were looking at the relation between cell phone usage and decreased sperm fertility in male donors. And what they found is that the more you're using your phone, the lower is your sperm vitality, basically, from those male donors. And we have been also, for instance, replicating the study and helping them to do a second round of the studies as Waveguard. This was a very interesting project, which was looking at the reproductive system of the human body. Something which brought us very much on the map, so to say, in this industry was that we were the first institution on the world which was making a 5G study. So when the 5G systems came out, there was a big debate about it. It was just everywhere in the news. Corona was just spiking the whole topic itself, since there was a big discussions, even in news in the United States and talk shows, about if this is even related to Corona or if this is something which is coming from 5G. So this is what was making it very public and very aware of the people that this is something which we need to take serious. What was really surprising me is the studies which are showing dangerous and making us more skeptical about the technology. They have one thing in common, and that is the higher the frequency which the technology is using, the more non-thermal effects we see. So again, this is not something which is basically producing heat in our tissue, but which is something which is causing long-term some kind of diseases and dysfunction in our body, to say it quite simple. This is something which the studies had in common. The higher the frequency, the more potential non-thermal damages are there. And so when 5G was proposed to be launching, it was very surprising to me that there hasn't been any kind of studies and safety studies being done on this addressed issue, that there seems to be some problems with that. And so I was thinking this is completely insane, to be quite frank, that we are launching a massive technology on the world, again, when there's already concerning studies about the current technology, and now we are trying to go for even more advanced and more powerful technology. And so what we were doing with Waveguard is we were launching the first 5G study. And we were going to a professor from the university in Hanover in Germany for the subject. And we were looking at human skin cells. What skin cells are doing is they are replicating to our closing wounds. So if we're having any sorts of injuries, the cells, they're duplicating and replicating themselves so that in order to close the wounds and close the skin surface again. We were using this sorts of human skin cells and we were exposing them to 5G. We had a normal setup where there was the same healing process took place without any sorts of radiation, which were in the room. And then we had one of our devices from Waveguard, which was supposed to reduce the effects. And what we found out is that the normal time for the wound to heal in this lab on this human cells was that it took 24 hours for a complete healing took place. When we are looking at how long it took the human skin cells when there is a 5G exposure, the time of healing was almost 4 days. Since we are having pretty much every day healing processes happening in our body, we are fighting each day with around 20,000 cancer cells. We're having oxidative stress, which we have to repair. We understand that this is not just about some sports injuries or by an accident in the kitchen where we are cutting ourselves, but we are understanding that this is a basic principle of ours. And if it has already an effect on only the skin cells, we can also assume that it will have similar effects on other parts of the body. And so these results were very shocking, and a number of universities reached out to us since then and have asked us also to replicate the studies with them again, because the results which we were publishing on the first 5G study were just extremely concerning and make the big breaking news in the scientific world. Yeah.
Okay, everything I hear is very scary. Now that we scared people, let's talk about how people are going to get away from it, like how it's going to be mitigated. Let's talk about me, then, everybody would be able to understand more or less what they can do, but what they cannot do. So I have your systems, and which you will explain in a bit, at home. So I'm kind of safer at home, but I leave home. I'm around. I'm in a studio now. They're recording some other stuff over there. Like there's like 6 cameras and whatever. Like I'm in a business center. So there are bazillion Wi-Fi's around.
Yeah.
Like you said, nowadays they're in the cars. There's the Wi-Fi connection the car has, the towers and etc. What does one need to do? Let's say you cannot shield yourself, obviously, when you're outside and going to work or being with your friends or going to school. Are there things that you can do when you come back at home or as a healing process to kind of reverse these damaging negative effects?
Well, that was many questions in one. So what can one do?
That's what I do.
So where do we start? So first of all, it's very advised that we are taking some sort of mindful usage of our devices. Not everything nowadays has to be smart. Not our fridge doesn't necessarily have to be smart. I don't think that the washing machine and the dishwasher, that they need to be programmed over the app, since we anyway have to load them still by hand. So I might as well say that we sort of, we need to look what kind of devices are we inviting into our house. And we need to be mindful about this. And just for an example, this weekend I was going to a furniture store and wanted to get a diffuser for aroma oils and so on. And 4 out of 5 devices, they were using an app to actually program from which time the diffusers shall work and aromatize the room. And I was like, this is, again, a good example of where we still have a choice by choosing the right devices to not have more exposure than what we really need. Mm-hmm. And this is the first part, that we are looking what we invite into our houses, and that the devices which we can control over, that we turn them off, that we are using our phone very consciously, that we are putting it in airplane mode in the times when we are not using it, and that we are, for instance, using a voice message recording instead of a cell phone call, or that we are using a headset which is free of radiation, the so-called air tube headsets, which is basically that there is not a wire connecting the phone to the headphones, but that there is some hollow part where the echo is only of sound traveling through, and we are actually having further distances to our devices, which is always something which we should keep in mind, have distance between ourselves and the devices. So this is the first part which we need to know, the mindful behavior of ourselves, making important choices, and trying also to stay away from some sort of ridiculous technologies. This is something which I think most people don't even anymore know how many devices they have which produce a Wi-Fi signal in their home. If we are thinking about already that nowadays we can buy diapers which are having a sensor and a Bluetooth connection and are telling us if the diaper is to be changed or not, then we understand how ridiculous the part of our technology became.
Yet I'm almost imagining when you talk about all these devices at home, I don't have, thank God, some of these devices at home. I have other things. It's almost like shooting laser beams. You're walking in the house. From the router, there's the phone, there's the computer over there, there's the washer machine, there's the whatever. It's like constant. So you're kind of living in these frequencies, correct? That's my understanding.
It is true. And you can almost not anymore escape from this, since even the places on Earth where there is no reception at all, they are being literally fought. And since the 5G satellites from Starlink has been launched, we have now 5G on the tip of Mount Everest. So it is something which is telling us, okay, this is also not something which is any more wanted, that we are not having anymore an area where we don't have any cell phone reception. And for persons, when we understand that we are sensitive about this and that we are having health effects from this and that we want to do maybe some sort of retreat and some sort of recovery from this and protect and stop the damage to our happening to ourselves, then we're in a whole different kind of talk. And this is something which I have been making myself as a mission to make it possible again to have some areas where we can recover, where we have our own sanctuary, where we have a protection in place that we are having at least our sleep in our living room and our bedroom, which are protected in such a way that this dangers and this adrenaline, that the stress and chronic diseases stop happening there. And the body also gets again the chance to normally heal from this constant level of stress. And this is something what is our mission from Waveguard, that we are producing devices and technologies which are enabling us to live in a modern flat, in a modern house, and have protection, and not only from our own devices, but also technologies which we normally cannot turn off, like the neighbor's Wi-Fi or the satellites and the cell phone reception, because we can do a lot of good things by mindful behaviors, by switching off the Wi-Fi at night and things like that, and putting our phones out of the bedroom and shutting them off and things like that. That's all very much recommended. But when it comes to real protection, then we have shielding as an option. And then my mission is to also create devices which help to mitigate the negative effects and enable us to live in this society without so much harm happening to ourselves.
I'm going to be coming to your device because I really highly recommend to everyone. But, one thing that I want you please clearly to explain to people, including my brother, when he's going to listen to this. He sleeps with his phone under his either pillow or next to his bedside table plugged in. Why it's worst when the phone is plugged in or the computer plugged in next to you? What happens? I don't even understand. So please explain us.
It is very clearly when we are reading this, and in terms of heat production and proton absorption in our body. So we have a higher electromagnetic field and a higher power which is traveling to our phone, and we are literally charging ourselves. And this is something which we can very clearly measure, and which has been done by varieties of measurements which are quite simple. You just take a meter into your hand, and then you're plugging in the phone which is being charged, and you're holding it in the hand, and you will see that basically your body gets positively charged, and positively charged not meaning in a positive health kind of way, but more from an energy point of view. We want always to have electrons in our bodies, which are basically antioxidants, which are fighting inflammation, and everything which is charging us, which is protons basically going into our body. They are something which is causing inflammation and heat and stress in our body. And the level of energy which we consume to our body is much higher when the phone is plugged in and we are using the device at the same time. So that is something which I very much endorse and say to people, stop using the phone while you're charging it. It's also something very important, yes.
And in one of our conversations, you were like, Esra, if one decides to take action, it's easier to avoid, if you can, less travel or less x-rays, or let's say take the TV out of your room, whatever. But it's really, really, really difficult to avoid phones and Wi-Fi's that even if it's not yours, the ones around you. Therefore, we're very focused to that. That was the message that you give me. Let's come to key devices. People, if they want, they can go on the website to see the radiuses and everything. But what does it do? Because I also heard you saying that all these pendants, stickers, I have some of them too. Like if they were working, your phone wouldn't be working. Correct?
Yes. There is this kind of harmonizers and stickers and pendants which you find for a few bucks basically on Amazon and other platforms, which are basically like telling you, okay, you can use this, then it will be not anymore so harmful, your phone. The thing is that this is something which hasn't been scientifically proven and which doesn't seem to have any effects from a research perspective. It looks like it's more of a placebo effect, which we are looking at, that the people want to do something and that they want to believe in something, but it has nothing to do with real life protection. We have to be very clear about this. The way this technology is usually described is that it works in the quantum field or something like this, and that's why it's not measurable, and it's only, mitigating the negative effects from the devices which you're exposed to. And the studies, unfortunately, they cannot confirm this kind of claims. And this is also because there is no principle of how this is supposed to work, because most of the technologies described, or technology is a big word for a sticker which you put on your phone, but what they are saying is that you're basically producing a frequency, and the same frequency that if we're talking about 2,400 220, which is our Wi-Fi megahertz frequency, that this chip is supposed to produce the same frequency. Okay, you could ask already, okay, where's the frequency generator and so on, but that doesn't bring us any further. But in the end, it comes to the point that this is something which is supposed to work like a noise canceling headphone, that it's listening to the outside, what kind of frequency is there, and then replicates the same noise back so that it's canceled out. And if this technology would really work, then it would mean that the cell phone reception would not anymore be active on your phone. So if you found a sticker and you put it on your phone and your cell phone doesn't have any more Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or any cell phone reception, that would be a strong indicator that it's working, and something like that is not on the market. And it would also defeat the purpose of still being able to use your device. So this is something which I don't recommend to people to use, this kind of sticker, since they give us a false sense of security to use our devices more carelessly because we are proposingly protected. And this is something which I have tried out already when I was sensitive, and none of those kind of gadgets which we tried had seemed to have any kind of results. Don't believe to this kind of sticker and pen and orgonite kind of gadgets which you are supposedly helping you to protect yourselves. And towards the Waveguard technology is taking a different approach. We were going with my father, and we are a family of fourth generation mechanical engineers in Germany. And so when we found out that there is an issue with this and that we cannot really protect ourselves, we thought this is something which we really have to address. We can help people here, we can help ourselves here, and it's something which everybody is affected in. This must be something which somebody has to have a real look at, with some university background. We were going there on a journey to trying out all sorts of devices and technologies and speaking with universities and professors. We were already part of the electrosensitive community in Germany. And we then were experimenting with some conductive liquids which we created and letting the radio waves interact with these conductive liquids. And so we gave this kind of prototypes to some of the people in the electrosensitive community after I found that this kind of technology is helping myself. Those people, they were supposed to fill out a survey and so on. When we came there to pick up the survey and the prototype, they didn't want to return us anymore their prototypes. And we were like, no, this is, not something which is ready. You got to return it. And the people, they felt so much better, and they had not anymore any of the electrosensitive symptoms, that they felt such a quality improvement that they didn't want to return it. And this is when we noticed that we are onto something. A few years later, the university in Greek, they were studying also the same principle, which we were already studying with the university in Milan, to actually let radio waves interact with liquids. And they found out that this can be also very beneficial and neutralize the negative effects. And this is called the depolarizing of radio waves. And so this is the technology which has been since then studied more and more by the universities, something which we have started in 2007. And we found out, okay, this is something which is actually helping people. And so then we were producing those prototypes. We were developing products based on this conductive liquids, and have been doing more and more studies since, and have been doing since then, I think now it's 29 studies which we have completed on this field. And that we have found out, okay, we are able to reduce the field strength, which is very important, that we can measure with a sensor that the amount of radiation which is inside of your room is drastically lower when you're putting one of our devices there.
How does it work though? Like, because I have one, and I have the biggest one, so it's kind of in the middle of the house, covers everywhere. So what happens? Because it looks like a very good looking, almost like furniture like thing. So these liquids taking in the radiation and depolarizing it, like, how does that work? I mean, just like simply, if you can explain, because I cannot wrap my mind around.
Well, basically, what is the intention there is that the devices have an E field, which is basically inside of the room coming from these conductive liquids, and that everywhere in a certain area where radio waves are traveling, they are being dispersed on a wider area. And so what we have been doing is we have been going to the most renowned institutions of technology and around the world, and we have been literally just building up this setup. And we have been having there a sensor and an antenna, and we had a generator, frequency generator, which is then producing a Wi-Fi frequency, and everything else is shut off. So you only have some very limited amounts of the earth magnetic field still in the room, but otherwise it's completely empty from any sorts of EMFs. And then there's only inside the one kind of Wi-Fi frequency, for example, which has been by conscious devices been created. And then since we have there this radio wave, then we are putting our device there, and then we are seeing how low the radiation is dropping to which levels. And so this is what we have been confirming on frequencies, which are now the most common ones. So basically we are focusing on everything which is above 800 megahertz. So including Bluetooth, radio frequencies, Wi-Fi's, 5G, 4G, these sorts of frequencies we have been focusing on. And we have been doing this kind of measurements up to 40 gigahertz. So we can confirm that we are reducing the field strengths measurably depending on the frequency, but up to 80%, for instance, 5G. And this reduction is still enough to make a phone call. And this is important. So we are still able to use the technology just a little bit on the lower energy level, basically. So the most interesting part was, what is then happening when we are using this technology when it's already in a more natural form, because depolarized radiation is something which is more natural. Everything with the university, they are calling it natural versus man-made EMFs. In the literature work, you would name it polarized versus unpolarized EMFs. And so when you have been depolarizing man-made EMFs so that they are more natural again, that they're not anymore like a laser, but more like a sunshine ray, more dispersed on a wider area, then the thing is the body has a whole body exposure and actually can take some counter measurements and start to handle that better. And it's not anymore concentrated on such a small area. This is apparently what is making it also more healthy and more natural, because there is not anymore so much interference happening for the body. And so this has been something which we have been creating with Waveguard, that we are depolarizing the EMFs which are coming inside the room from our own devices or outside devices. And then we have been looking, for instance, with a 5G study with the human skin cells, which I was before mentioning, that we saw, okay, that even when you had still an active 5G signal on the cells, which was making a phone call with 5G, when we had a key device 1.5 meters away from the cells, then the cells would heal in 26 hours. Versus when we had not had the key shield there and the 5G exposure, it was 96 hours. So without any radiation, it took 24 hours to heal the cells. With the 5G, it took 96 hours for the wound to heal. And with a key shield and 5G radiation there, the same setup, it took 26 hours. So we also see that we can use the technology again, but it's not anymore that harmful. And this is confirmed by studies. And therefore, we were awarded also in 2022 in October, the Invention of the Year of Europe, and now started to get some government support for our work.
I really, 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 really love this conversation, because Hagen, I really feel safe in my apartment. Obviously, I believe in the studies, and it's a matter of educating people. That's why I'm doing this podcast, and I also put some articles in my website. I know that you guys are going to be coming up with a portable, not that big thing that I showed, because this is still not like you need like a backpack or something, but a smaller device that with 1 meter radius. I think that you are reproducing a new version of it.
That is correct.
That would be then, if that's in our pocket and we go around in this crazy world, we're most likely protected anywhere we go. This is something that I'm really looking up to.
So currently we are having our most popular device, which is the Key Shield, which is a device which is probably in the size of maybe a 500 milliliter water bottle or something like this.
We have.
Yes, for the people which are watching it. But it's around the size of a 500 milliliter water bottle. We used to have a device called the Key Mobile, which is even a bit smaller than a pack of cigarettes, and which had already a 1 meter radius. But this one was not anymore sufficient to protect ourselves from 5G. And so we stopped the production for this unit. This year, we will be launching the newest version of the Key Mobile, which is again 5G proven and which is also still even a little bit smaller than the previous version. So this will be something which is fairly small, which you can take into any pocket, into any jacket pocket, or you don't need to have any purse or any kind of backpack with you to travel with you. It has a 1 meter radius compared to the Key Shield, which has up to 2.5 meter radius. And so the Key Shield is more of a hybrid device which you can take with you also to work, or like yourself now in the studio, which you can place somewhere inside of your room, and then you have your body free and your whole room is protected. And when you're going back from work, you can put it, for instance, in your bedroom, and then you have a safe bedroom from that aspect. And the Key Shield is the most studied 5G or any kind of radiation protection device. And so this is something which is very popular right now, and this year we'll be launching the smaller version again, which is really for personal use and always to carry with you, and which will also be cheaper than the Key Shield, which is going to be basically then a device which is very affordable for everybody and make it really available some safe, proven 5G protection technologies.
So I want to wrap up with these couple of messages that I learned from you. Let me repeat them, and if I forget something, you can add. So the most important thing is that we can at least do our best not to use our phone near to our head. Put it in the airplane mode if we're not using. For the children who are nowadays using a lot of iPads and stuff, download the videos instead of letting them watch it through the Wi-Fi. If possible, turn off the whole Wi-Fi system when you sleep. Hopefully, if you can get your hands on one of these devices, and pray God not to get more harm, because it seems like this whole technology world is like in one way helping us, the other way is destroying us. Correct?
It is true. It's a very good summary. And yes, basically you can categorize them a little bit like you were doing that in some things which are for free, and otherwise you have the possibility to also get a Waveguard device and protect yourself even more. Yes.
To my audience, I want to add here that I'm going to be adding Waveguard's link in podcast page. We're also adding a shop page on our website to create affiliate programs with some products that I really like. So I'm going to be guiding people toward you, Hagen. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.